Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure for us to watch a great slide presentation from Peter Ness.
So let me know if you can hear me okay. The mic is really for the recording. You guys all here? Okay. So this is a 15-year-old clinic, but it's not the same clinic I did 15 years ago at NHRHTA. It's expanded greatly. When I first did that clinic, it was probably less than 40 slides, and it covered prototype and modeling all in one shot. And I can't do that anymore because I've developed so much information. I've had a lot of good folks provide me information, a lot of good discussions to nail down specifically the history section. So we're going to talk about the history, early history, for those of you that are pre-1900 history. Yep.
Pull that mic closer to you if you're going to look back at us. There you go.
How's that? Okay, great. Then we'll start talking about the New Haven. This is really going to be on the equipment, the rolling stock, and the facilities. And if we don't get through it all, we're going to stop where we get. If anyone has any questions or comments, when you show photos, people recognize things, it jogs memories, just shout them out, okay? So way back in the early days, this goes back to 1840s, 1850s. TOFC as we know it today, if we just generically say it's putting some sort of another transport on top of a flat car, is not new at all. It's been around for more than 100 years at this point. And what I'm showing there, Jim Fellows found a woodcut somewhere. That's the actual Long Island Railroad system that I describe over in the text section. And then we've got a shot of the North Shore line from 1926, showing how they managed to transport vehicles on trailers in their electric trains. So as times went by, and this is something I'm still sort of researching, but if you look up here, you'll see Lehigh Valley and I think Boston, Maine, Pennsylvania. A couple of railroads had early container service, and I haven't really researched those, but those are another area of interest to me, even though they're not New Haven. We're more familiar with later era containers and shipped in gondolas, but I'm curious to find out about that. But in any event, for the modern era, Chicago and Great Western was really the prime source of TOFC traffic. They did it first, and in 1937 came the New Haven, and in subsequent years, Chicago and Rio Grande Western joined in. So that's an early shot of the Chicago Great Western piggyback terminal. I found this amusing. So in February 1957, there was a conference specifically on, it was Piggyback Night by the New England Railroad Club. And James L. Bargrove made a comment about the origination of the term piggyback, and apparently it arose in a court case, and it was a trucker that coined the name, and it stuck into this millennium. So I thought that was an interesting find. No. Anyone interested in steam era? Anyone ever think they could just go out and start doing TOFC service in their steam era? Probably not. This is 1938. This is roughly 6 months after service started. It's a pretty good shot of an R2A. Consolidated trailers on a 17200 series flat behind it. The trailers are facing away from the engine, so all I can tell you about this photo is the train departed Boston, probably heading to Harlem River. and I don't know where the location is. So anyone have any thoughts on where that may be? It's before New Haven, but, well, if it jogs a memory, just let me know. I'm curious as to where that happened. So in the beginning, this photo is interesting in several reasons. Yep, it shows New England Transport. Those trailers were carried by the New Haven in their TOFC service. The other interesting thing to note is the apron construction. So as we go forward and get into later years, you're going to notice that by the early 50s, New Haven standardized on a design that had a cam-operated, sprung, counterweighted apron so that basically one man could raise and lower the apron on the car. This was no mechanical. The apron was just a hinged plate that went from car to car. M&M Transportation, you're going to see this transportation company recur throughout at least into the mid-50s, late 50s as a matter of fact. Early trailers were 24-foot single axle trailers. I'm not really going to talk about modeling here, but this is basically a short through-house Aero van type trailer. And again, this is not a great shot, but you can see that the apron has a strap that interlocks. There's a slot basically in the back side of the apron. The strap can lock in there, but there are no springs or other mechanical features to it.
Excuse me, Pete,
Yeah.
did they have to unload those trailers sequentially, or did they uncouple the cars?
It was circus style, and I've actually got a section on the operations that will walk through that. Thanks. Again, more early traffic, trains that ran between Boston, Harlem River, BH1 and HB2. So this is post-war. New Haven was moving 1,100 trailers monthly. So keep in mind, when they started out, they started with less than 25 flat cars from the 17200 series converted to this service. It did continue through the war. I do not have any records during that period other than if you look at some of the freight package schedules, you'll see the trains listed in there. So it did continue through the war. Trailer length was starting to increase a bit. So these were 50-foot flat cars, and the trailers now are pretty much 24 feet on average. This is a nice shot, some DL109s. The trailer ends are facing away from the locomotive. So this one is headed towards Boston. It's how they would have arrived from, how they would have been loaded from Harlem River Yard. And it's put just a quick post-war shot. Buried way, so you see a string of M&M trailers. I said they're going to keep coming up. There's an Arrow transport trailer stuck in there. If you look at enough old trailer photos, you get to know what they look like. It's not obvious. But so you can see in here, these are still all the 17200 series flats. If you look closely at the photo, you can start to see by post-war they were adding the mechanical controls or the mechanical hinges to the cars at that point.
M&M stands for?
I do.
And what would it be?
See me after. No, I think it's Markland and Maitland. I might have it in here. Yeah.
Macklin and Marks.
Oh,
Macklin and Marks.
Markland and Marks. Okay, thanks. Appreciate it. I have to go by what I wrote down. I can't remember anymore. So.
During this time frame, what was the average number of cars that were moved?
All I can tell you is how many cars they had, and they ran, say, 2 trains daily, one in each direction. By this time, they were up to about 40 cars.
20 cars in each direction.
Yeah. The one thing about this service, they did not ship empties back and forth, right? So, and you'll see when we talk about the terminals, they did have storage tracks for the cars. So, So someone earlier asked me if I was going to talk about the trail liner cabooses. This is about all I have. In December 52, two cabooses, 591 and 592, had plates installed with New Haven trail liner. It was documented in the 1952 Freight and Package Guide. That's the little guy up here. But New Haven referred, even though they really suspended this whole advertising campaign, they continued to refer to trail liner service. The photo was at Harlem River Yard. You can see we're looking at the backs of the trailers and the rear of the train. So these cars, and I have a photo of Harlem River. These cars were shoved into the yard and then backed into the ramps to be loaded and unloaded at this site. J.A. Garvey was another shipper that used New Haven service. Actually, in the very first slide, introductory slide and on the promo that Paul created, the two photos there, one is of Boston in the 50s and one is of Boston in late 50s, early 60s, that shows a mixture of Collegian cars in with the 17500 and 17800 series flats. And J. Garvey trailers are featured in there. So the service has been going on now, this is 53, service has been going on for 12 years or so. And finally the ICC, which really heavily regulated and governed the railroads, got around to coming up with plans for service. So again, all those early roles that started service, typically what they did was one of two things. They either carried railroad-owned trailers only on their flat cars to the destination, or they carried motor carrier trailers on their flat cars to the destination. So in 1954, the ICC issued a decision, and basically the way I look at it, all of the various intermodal plans, even to this day, originated by the New Haven going to the ICC with their 20 questions. And I do have an article on 20 questions, but basically the ICC decision that's summarized here addresses most of the points that the New Haven brought. What rights and what privileges does the trailer owner have? What are they responsible for in preparation for loading the trailer? Who owns the cargo? Who's responsible for the cargo while it's in transit on the railroad? Is it the motor carrier or the freight forwarder, or is it the shipper who's actually using this whole process? There's a lot of complex questions to be resolved at this time for this new service.
Peter?
Yep.
New Haven originated the plans?
So New Haven went to ICC with 20 questions. So if you go back to the period issues of Railway Age, you'll see several articles on that. And it was the answers that the ICC came up with that eventually led to the different plans for the intermodal system. They didn't, let me be clear, New Haven did not create them, and I don't think they would have done it that way. So these are the plans that came up in years. So several of them didn't generate until late 50s and then into the 60s. I honestly have not researched to see what plans are in place today. We've got a lot of different intermodal systems in place. But if you look at what's called Plan 1, railroad flat car, motor carrier trailer, and Plan 2, which was railroad door-to-door. Those are what I was describing before. That's where it was a motor carrier trailer on a railroad flat car or a railroad trailer on a railroad flat car. Those were the two initial basic plans. And the rest followed up as the industry adopted this means, the trucking industry adopted this means of transportation, and the railroads expanded them. This is an interesting shot of Harlem River Yard, 1954. And this is a prelude to what's about to come. But if you look at, in general, the trailers here, if you want to be like me, and you know that the exterior posts are on 2-foot spacings, you can actually get the length of the trailers that have the posts, and then you can compare them against the other trailers. But in general, these are all between 30 and 34-foot trailers that are in use in the yard. And you can see that In this particular photo, there are no New Haven trailers, there are no New England transport trailers. These are all motor carrier trailers, and that was the majority of the shipping that the New Haven did between Boston and Harlem River. In 1955, at the very end, and I don't know that this photo is Peter McLaughlin photo, it's a great photo, and I don't know if this is from 1955, but it's the best example I've found to show a New Haven flat and a Wabash flat. So you see two railroad flats, two railroad-owned trailers on them. It's a publicity shot of sorts. But look at the difference in the tie-down mechanisms with these cars. And I'll talk more about the New Haven ones. But the New Haven did not have chain cables going to the rub rails on the sides of the flat cars. So you can imagine this is an interchange at its nascent birth. You can imagine how complex it was compared to where things are today. Not only did you have different flat car lengths, different tie-down mechanisms, but you also had different aprons or bridge plates, different unloading mechanisms, right? So it's a 1956 photo. This is definitely towards the west end, heading towards Harlem River. And again, if you want to go blind quick, a lot of these string are M&M trailers, and there are a couple of other motor carrier lines in there too. But you do, and these are all 500 and 800 series flats. But this gives you an example that if the freight was going to Harlem River from Boston, it wasn't exclusively TOFC service. Railroad always wanted to make the most efficient use. Some of those cars might have been empty returns to other connecting railroads. Some of them may have been loads destined for Harlem River Yard, which was still active at that time. This photo I came across just last year. This is Harlem River Yard 1956. And again, if you like to go blind, there are two trailers at the back of this string of Hartford trailers. There are New England transport trailers. So myself, yeah, I'm a big fan of the red trailers with the white diagonal stripe, New England transport. But actually in the mid-50s, just before the Collegian cars came out, New Haven, New England Transportation Company did change their logo. It's a map of the New England states. It's a lot like the map they used on buses. And they had a couple of swooping lines, one from the upper left down to the lower right, and one from the upper left down to the lower right, the other way. But again, so these are the cars, the aprons are facing towards the, let's see. The front row of cars is in storage. The back row of cars is going to be facing an unloading ramp. So the aprons are at the front of those cars, and the trailers are positioned so they can be driven off at the ramp. You'll see a photo of Harlem River Yard. The TOFC Yard was, the tracks curved around the bridge, so the trains would pull into Harlem River Yard, uncouple the TOFC cars, and they would be backed into the tracks, as you saw in the picture with the trail liner caboose in it. Deodac Collegian. And Rapido has again confirmed they're not making these cars just yet, just for those of you who are concerned like I am. So Collegian's flat cars were enormously successful in Europe. And so New Haven partnered with him, and they performed some contract work with Piggyback Services was the company name. You'll see a photo of that in the truck name. However, as we're going to see, what happened to the Collegian design is it was licensed to be used by Pullman. So Pullman actually built the production series of Collegian cars. Last, I presented this at NERPM, and someone said, because they read the caption, they said, "That's not a Maybrook train," and I lapsed for a minute, and I said, "No, it's not. I wonder what's going on." So pay attention to the consist in this 1958 photo and the one on the next slide. So in this one, you see predominant uses 17500 and 17800 series cars, and there may be a Collegian back here. And we go to this other photo, they're basically all Collegians that were used in service. So the point being, there were not solid trains of Collegians all the time, nor were there solid trains of the 40-foot flats all the time. They did mix them up. They used the equipment they needed to deliver the trailers they needed to. In the late 50s, trailer trains, so in 1956, Penn State, Norfolk, and Western formed trailer train. And in today's world, trailer train still exists in a different corporate organization. So had a long life to it. And even in the early 60s, we were seeing trailer lengths increase. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Flat car length was increasing, and trailer hitch standardization came about that eliminated a lot of the mechanical construction that New Haven had to do on their TOFC service. So we get into a later era. Trailer length is longer, even though shorter trailers were still in use. This is a 1600 series flat, G85, 85-foot flat. And by this time, there was still service to Harlem River, but by this time, interchange was going on pretty heavily. So a lot of this traffic moved the Maybrook route, connected with the Erie at that point. So we're going to talk a little bit about trailer handling equipment now. So this is a diagram from railway age that does have some issues with it. When you start looking at the actual trailers and photos of trailers in transit. It looks like in this diagram that there's a one jack stand on the head pin of the trailer. There was actually two jack stands and a beam going across. But the basic chain mechanism, you can see this drawing by 1952 again, the early 50s, New Haven had standardized on a, you'll see in photos, but the bottom down here of the hinge on the apron, there was a cam type part that gave mechanical advantage to raising and lowering the apron. The spring was there to help with the raising of the apron and also to prevent slamming when it was just lowered. So you can see on the text over here, these are requirements for one car. That's the required equipment for one car. So you had screw jacks, you had chocks, you had chains, you had beams, tie bars, and then the apron plate, of course, had to be put on. Stakes for latching. So the front of the cars at this time had two tall stakes for the apron plate, and there was a guide stake. And you'll see there's a diagram in here later on. Those were removed by about 1953. They were found not necessary. So the cost to make a car was $900 at that time. Yeah, leave it there. So how are these loaded? So in the upper right, this is how the equipment that we just went through was laid out on the decks. This is at Harlem River again. Equipment was laid out the decks before the cars were loaded. So the trailers could be backloaded directly over the securing equipment, and then a crew would, as the last car was filled, the apron would go up and the crew would start installing the devices. So here's the crew over here. I didn't want this job even if I was a young guy, but they're under the trailer and they're fastening the chains from the trailer frame to the deck. It doesn't reproduce well here, but there's still three guys here, again securing the chains. There's a tie bar going across the rear chains that came down from being secured over the axle. And on the front, there's the beam going across, and then the chains going down to the deck. So just think about this for a minute. If you had 10 or 15 cars in a string, and some said, hey, back this trailer up to the end, will you? Now, I don't drive a truck, but you had to have a special skill. And of course, you had special tractors for doing this. So the tractors were equipped with lift ramps so that they could basically pick a trailer up off the ground with the dolly wheels down and have that section elevated. And then magically, they would just back down the ramp without running the trailers over the rubber wheels onto the ground. There, you can see there's an extended mirror on the driver's side over here, and there's actually a mirror on this side too, to aid the drivers. And again, this is a very early photo, 61. So there's a lot of skill and equipment done. We talked a little bit earlier about loading these, right? And so these are a description of the loading times I've been able to find out. So you look at the early cars, it was more than 8 minutes. When the collegians came in, it knocked it down to 1.5 minutes. These are all text articles. It's not like someone's doing calculations. I'm not really sure. The manpower required is much reduced over here. One driver, one employee minimum. It doesn't include the time and labor. So when we talk about the collegian cars in a few minutes, there was hardware that had to be attached to the dollies and on the rear axles to load those trailers onto the flat cars, and there was a special loading ramp that had to be used. So installing the equipment on the trailer and placing the ramp to load the trailers is not included in that 1.5 minute. And then you see the contemporary 85-foot flats. It's one driver in 1 minute. And that was because you didn't have to worry about aprons anymore. The locking mechanism on the hitch took care of your trailer fix securement on the deck. So, and of course, keep in mind, as I mentioned, trail train was already around and the New Haven wasn't going that way. So you can see where there were some differences in costs from the different carriers as time moved forward.
At what point was the fifth wheel hitch assembly put in service?
I think it was 60, 61, the ACF hitch.
No.
ACF developed the hitch, yeah. Yeah, and I think they sold it to both the ATX and Pullman at the time. It could be retrofitted onto flat cars.
It revolutionized piggyback.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I mean, when you see the time drop from 8 minutes down to 1 minute, and it was just a driver, no other labor involved in doing it. So this is a photo of a 1937 photo of a 17200 series flat, partly modified for TOFC service. When these flats were originally delivered, the brake wheel was mounted on the back of the car, so they moved this to the side of the car to create a clear path for the trailers to traverse. But there's no apron installed here yet. Again, so a little bit better shot. These are the 17200 cars in service. And again, if you look closely at these photos, the apron doesn't have that counter or the spring to act as a counterweight or the cam action. So the early photos, they moved the brake wheel. They put on wood rub wheels. They still had the mid-car high safety post, and then the manually operated apron. So in 1950, there were 40 cars. I think I said earlier, the first year, like 37, 38, there were less than 25 cars in service. So it gives you an idea of how the service grew. 17264 in service. That was the photo that actually inspired my interest in all of this. Still one of my favorite photos. So photo of the 17200 cars as they were built. They were 50-foot cars. And you can see this is the original New Haven drawing. When they received them, the brake wheel is mounted at the end of the car. So then in the late 40s, so at 48, let's see, 44, New Haven bought another series of flats from Greenville. And so both the 17200 and 17300 series cars were purchased, and then New Haven converted them for TOFC service in their shops, in Reedville shops, basically. Some were done at Maybrook, we'll get to that. And so these cars came with the drop staff for the handbrake, so no need to reposition the brake wheel. And so these cars in 1948, 25 flats were converted. So these cars were 53 foot, I think those were 52, and you really couldn't carry any more trailers, but they began basically refurbishing the newer flat cars in service. I still have not nailed down if, when these cars were converted, if they were still using the wood rub rails or not. I've got a 1952 drawing that shows the steel pipe rails or iron pipe rails. This is 17300 in service at Harlem River Yard. Again, this photo is 1954. The diagrams say that these posts were removed in 53. So, you know, it's photo reality versus a drawing sheet. Sometimes it took a while for the railroads to catch up with what the mechanical department thought they should be doing. So earlier I showed there were 40 cars of 17200s in service in 1950. Notice there were 73 cars. So in 1950, you had over 100 cars in TOFC service between the 17200 and 17300 series cars. This is a drawing. It's not really the 17300 series car so much as it is a loading diagram. So what you should be familiar with now is this was how the layout of the equipment on the deck. They had a drawing for that. It was standardized so the trailers could be loaded so that whichever crew was working on securing or unsecuring the trailers knew where to find things to secure it and where to put things when they were unsecuring it. And it's kind of hard to believe that this diagram is showing that the you could still load 2 trailers on this flat car, because by the early 50s, trailer length was growing up to 34 feet and longer. So it's tough to put 2 34-foot trailers on a 53-foot flat car. The reason I have this drawing in here, so again, this is the 17300 series again, is because this one has a note that shows, this is the actual car diagram, but this one also indicates the presence of the guard stanchions on the side, but it also shows the steel pipe for the rub rails on here. So TOFC traffic kept growing, and in was this 51, I think? Yeah, 51, yeah. So in 51, the New Haven ordered frames, they got from Commonwealth, and at Maybrook they built a couple hundred flat cars, the 17500 series flats. These were 40-foot cars, but by this time New Haven had standardized on their apron construction, so these are the same aprons that were applied to the 17300 cars, and the 17200 cars were retrofitted with exactly the same apron and with the steel pipe rub rails on them. And the equipment, nor did the equipment change. The chains, the jack stands, the beams, all that all remained the same. The 17700 series flat, in 1953, they continued to expand this. So these were essentially an add-on to the 17500 series. There's absolutely no difference in distinction in the build of the cars. They use the same casting, so I lump all these together. Fun fact, in 56, the New Haven Railroad leased some 17500 cars to the B&M. Now, I don't know from this photo if this was a B&M promotional photo or if it was a B&M trailer on New Haven TOFC service. Friend shared with me some early B&M railroad publications that had photos showing the actual loading of New Haven flat cars with B&M trailers, but they don't look like this. the trailers are much older than this.
Off Worcester, Peter, they used to load the trailers, God Street. You would see them loading up the trailers.
Is that right? Yeah. Yeah. Neat. Interesting side note here, because one of my favorite HO scale trailers is any one that has the New Haven logo on it, whether it's Ulrich or some other one that's not correct. But this was from the 1960 annual report. The New Haven leased those trailers. We'll talk about them in a minute. They leased those trailers basically for 1 year, and after that, they were no longer, if the New Haven continued leasing them, they no longer looked like that at all, because subsequently New Haven bought the Proof-Off trailers. But in 1960, someone thought it was a great idea to show a photo of the earlier service. So I just found that curious. So the 17500 series flats, many of these were in service until or they were on the roster, put it that way, on the roster until the end of the New Haven. But a lot of them were removed from TOFC service in 55, 56, because this is leading up to the Collegian cars coming on board. And they were initially dedicated to rail welding service. So a lot of these cars were taken out of TOFC, the equipment was removed, they became straight general service flat cars, and were used in the various projects for welded rail around the New Haven. Some of them ended up in work service, some of them ended up in general service. All right, so here's the diagram for the 17500 cars. You can see here there is no guidepost, and the notes down here say that the removable guidepost was removed. It was called a removable guard post. It was called a removable guard post, and they removed it because it was no longer needed. But again, now again you're seeing the springs, and in the detailed drawings you can see the cam action that was attached to the apron, but still chains, blocks, and beams for securing the trailers to the cars. There's 17800 outside of Reedville shops. The 17800s had a different frame to them, and so one of the telltales of the 1700 cars is that the bolster for the trucks extends outside of the side sill, and in these cars they don't. So a couple of 1700 cars lined up for loading. This was the frame. It was from who was it? International? Yeah, International Steel. This is a frame from the Dave Peters collection. Some of you may have seen Laura Cat Smith speaking earlier this morning. It's a wealth of information. I highly encourage everyone to use it. It's from the Dave Peters collection. And this photo I just turned up this year. I can't, it is a 1700 series flat. I could tell because I could play with the contrast enough to see it did not have bolsters sticking out the side, but I can't tell what car number it is. But there's your New Haven owned Duravan trailer on a 40-foot flat car. And here's the diagram for the 17800 cars. Again, standard apron, standard rub rails, and standard securing mechanisms used. This is interesting. In 1952, Railway Age article, mechanical engineer for the New Haven Railroad said, accordingly, in the fall of 1950, it was decided to standardize on a flat car designed to transport a single trailer measuring up to 36 feet in overall length, weighing 80,000 pounds gross, which could be used for all future rail service. And so this is the slide I chose to put. This is the increase in trailer lengths that was going on at this time. So talk about short-sightedness, or maybe it was just a publicity statement, but not quite true. And keep in mind that part of this decision-making is what led the New Haven to partner with Deodat Collegian. So speaking of which, so this is Piggyback Incorporated, that's an actual ad they had promoting their service. There were first couple experimental cars built, and those were road tested by the New Haven. No other railroad tested them at this time. And they continued regular service. They were a few feet shorter than the production cars. This is what I was talking about earlier. So, in order to load a trailer on a collegiate flat, you had to have a pan basically with rollers on it that was installed on the dollies in the front. And then in the back, you had to again clamp the axles in place, so there were securing mechanisms in place for the rear axle. And when those were in place, it lifted the trailer up off of the wheels up off of the catwalks, whatever you want to call them, on the sides. So the rear of the trailer with the load was suspended, was basically suspended by the mechanical clamping to the center of the car. So for a very short time, Piggyback Incorporated tractors were used in Boston and Harlem River. But this shows again, here's the special apron plate that had to be installed from your loading ramp to get across the first car, and then you had bridges that extended the center, that not really, just off-center rails that the fastening, that tray I showed you with the wheels on it and the clamps that were placed on the rear axle, what they traveled on. You were still doing circus-style loading on these cars. There's a production car and a production car in service with a couple of the Netco trailers, later scheme era trailers. I lost some collegiate cars, and I still haven't found all of them. I think I'm down to missing 25 at this point. But consider the time frame here. So by the late 50s, Trail Train had been in business for several years. Trailer hitches were not standardized yet, but they were moving close to the ACF1 design. Trailers were longer, flat cars were longer, and even the collegians weren't good for 40-foot trailers at that time. So New Haven started to do things, and again, this goes into the era when the post-McGinnis era, when it's hard to find records, trace records. But what we know is that while New Haven had originally leased, not bought, 200 collegians, and their contract was with Collegian. Remember, I said the product was licensed to Pullman, but the Collegian contract ended up moving to General American, to GATC, a transportation corporation. So there were no more Collegian cars per se built, although the early 85-foot cars could be used with Collegian cars. We'll talk about that in a minute. But over the years, we started seeing these 200 Collegians in New Haven disappear. Some definitely did go to Southern Pacific, but there was a period where 100 cars were missing, and then suddenly 173 showed up. Some of the cars were stored in a yard in Boston. It wasn't Reedville Yard. It was over sort of near, there was a small yard sort of before Northeastern University, Huntington Ave. A number of them were stored, not in service there. And ultimately, a lot of cars were traded in to cover the cost or reduce the cost of the G85 flats that came in.
Pete, what's the head, the column had SOE?
Oh God, can I go back?
SOE. Right column.
Oh, summary of equipment. So the ORER books, the summary of equipment's with New Haven, summary of equipment documents. So if you have any from the late 50s and early 60s that aren't listed there, let me know, because fill in the blanks. So again, there's a production shot of the 1800 series flats. Sort of an unglamorous end, so a lot of the collegians were converted over to transport scrap metal and other refuse materials. And that's what they looked like after they were no longer in TOFC service. And I think there may still be some cars around. Jim Kincaid was kind enough to work with me in the Pullman library, so this is an actual Pullman drawing, not a New Haven drawing of the construction of the collegian cars. And I've got this photo in here again because this is now the introduction to the G85 flats that came in 63. They began production 2 years earlier, but again, the New Haven, not being the swiftest railroad in the country, held off for a bit. And there were financial issues too. So the delivery dates of the 16,000 series cars, you can see this is an early photo courtesy of Jim Panza. That is, the purpose of that particular bridge is to connect to a collegian car. That's the only purpose it had on there. So later G85s were not built with that. And we've got a diagram of the G85 car, New Haven diagram. All right, how are we doing on time, Paul?
You got at least 25 minutes.
Awesome, good. Because now we're going to talk about vehicles. So this is pretty much all Netco, but it's also going to get into some of the carriers a bit. So Netco was, many people know, was the transportation arm of the, or the motor vehicle transportation arm of the New Haven. They ran bus service, coach service, and they also ran a freight service. And so it was the Netco tractors that were specially modified with the fifth wheel, hydraulically operated to raise up, to load the trailers onto the flat cars. But they also, if you go back and you think about the different plans that were offered, it was also necessary for New Haven when they did use their own trailers. So it's railroad-owned trailer, railroad-owned flat car, Plan 2, that they had the capability to accept freight and to deliver it to the customer. This is a shot of one of the later Netco trailers. This photo is really interesting. This is actually one of the press photos of demonstrating the experimental collegians in Boston, South Boston. And way back here, that is a Fruhauf Aerovan trailer, like the old New England ones with the white stripe. But on the side of it is the new Netco Herald. It's on, so is that Herald there applied to the old trailer. This is the only photo I've seen of that, so please don't go and try and model it because I honestly think it was just publicity that it was done. Harlem River Yard is shown, 61. And again, a color photo of the Netco trailer in transit. New Haven trailers, and this is one of my big mea culpas. For about 5 years or 4 years, insisted these were 35-foot trailers. They are 32-foot trailers. I learned how to count posts and do math, so that's the reason for that. But these were lease trailers, and these are probably the most iconic trailers that people have seen images of in general. These photos are taken in Providence. We'll get to the, you can actually see the crane. These were not loaded by crane, but you can see the Providence crane in the background there. And they could have been Gindie trailers. They could have been strict trailers. I've worked with some experts, and because you cannot see a trailer nameplate, it's kind of difficult. There's not like a unique construction feature that we can tell which was which on these trailers. Some information came from annual reports. I haven't found any lease documents on these yet, but it appears New Haven did have 50 of these trailers. So there's an annual report that says that. But this is the biggest group that I've seen a photo of. And then a couple years later, in 57, New Haven purchased these trailers. So these were the Fruhauf Duravan trailers. I got the purchase dates, and they were renumbered in '63. I think it was still ICC, could have been DOT, but all railroad trailers were renumbered into the schemes we're familiar seeing when the intermodal cars go by now, with a couple of letter prefix, ZZ or some other code, and then 6 or 8 digits. Nowadays, the digits actually define the container or trailer dimensions or weights or something, but back in these days it was just a sequential number. There's one of the trailers on a Lackawanna flat, and one again on the loaded on a production 18,000 series car. So in the 1960s, the ORER started including information on trailers. So that's what we're going to be looking at the next few minutes. These are just various versions. I pretty much have their leased trailers summarized over here by year, and then going into the notes section of the ORER. So the thing to notice here is in '61, they had a number of 32, 34, and 35-foot trailers. And when you get down to '67 and the end of the New Haven, they were all exclusively 40-foot trailers. So that's a fairly rapid change in standardization and trailer length. A couple more trailers that are in the number series. Exterior post strict trailer over on the right-hand side, and then what is that? Oh, it's 40-foot trailer, unidentified manufacturer. Oh, they may have been strict trailers. Some were strict and some were highway. So 705 would have been a highway trailer. Berman, that's documented over here. Leased trailers to New Haven in the later years, and this trailer has NHZ marks on it. Railway Express or Realco actually leased trailers to New Haven in later years as well. Kind of a neat shot of Harlem River Yard. It's a short REA trailer, and I think this is from 1961. And this photo is also, I think, from '61. But that is like a 24-foot REA trailer still being shipped in TOFC service in that late day. So here's an overview of the two yards as they appeared in the 50s. You got Harlem River over on the upper left and South Boston over on the lower right. Just showing, South Boston. Got a shot of the ramp over here, and again, you'll see in the upcoming photo, but there were multiple tracks for staging the flat cars for loading trailers at both sites. Just an assortment of photos. Once you get the hang of it, it's kind of easy to know. So the trailers were backed on at Boston and the aprons flipped up, and the trailers were backed on at Harlem River and the aprons flipped up, but those cars had to be pulled from the yard onto the main for shipment, whereas the Boston cars were just pulled right out of the yard. So you get a hang of identifying, if you can see in the photos where the apron is, you can sort of tell which direction the train's moving in. So facilities, again, from railway age, but go back, if you look at the photos that I've shown, they were pretty standard facilities. There was a apron area, there were rails, there was a catwalk on each side. Catwalk had lighting on it, ramp was fairly standard. So, again, some valuable information if you're considering the modeling aspect of these operations. An overview of 5 Yard in South Boston, so you can see the concrete aprons around the TOFC track loading area. And this is a shot of Providence. And again, you can, I'd have to hunt for it, but I'm pretty sure the crane is in this photo somewhere. But again, you've got Several tracks dedicated to the flats. You can see the trailers off to the side here, and then the aprons in the actual loading area. So Harlem River is a really big place. I've never been to it or anything, but, you know, so inbound trains and arrival departure tracks, and then from the photos you've seen, you go under the bridges, and there's the TOFC facility there. So trains from Boston pulled in, cars were uncoupled and backed into the facilities at Harlem River. This is Hartford, I think? New Haven, yeah, Winter Street. And again, it's hard for me to pick out from this photo. It's a 65 photo. I believe TOFC service stopped several years before that. But there's numerous tracks in this area. There's still trailer shipping garages over here. So somewhere in this area of the yard was the TOFC service. If anyone has an aerial photo from the late 50s that shows it, I'd appreciate knowing where you got it. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and Lamberton Street is further, would be off to the lower left. Morgan Street, also, it's written in the annual report, there was TOFC service there. It was a transloading facility for a number of years. So, you know, freight was shipped in, and there was a freight house there, and it was loaded onto trucks for shipment. But if you look at the aerial view again, I suspect it could have been somewhere in this area. It looks like there's some concrete aprons in that area. And again, I'm getting a lot of this information from the annual reports, which are pretty good at the positive aspect when they started service at some of these locations, and not so good at saying when they ended it. That's Springfield. I apologize for you. Station's way up here. The TOFC yard is way down there. So that's, I wanted to give some relationship to the station, the yard, and where the TOFC aprons were for TOFC service in Springfield. Excuse me, so it's a pretty high altitude photo. So that's it. So I've had a lot of folks provide a lot of information, a lot of insight, and a lot of direction on how to capture all this information. And I've also gathered a pile of references too to support everything I'm presenting in here. So thank you. Any questions? Yeah.
Does anybody make a model of the M&M?
You're going to have to go to part 2. Yeah, no, seriously. No, to answer your question, no. But, well, actually, yes. If you model an N scale, you can get one. Okay, from Eastern Seaboard Scale Models. But we're working on getting some stuff in HL. Okay. But yeah, so this was part 1. This is the prototype. I try to cover as much of it as I can. Part 2 is all about modeling, so the cars, facilities, and trailers. And then I'm working this winter on a part 3, which is going to be just the motor carriers, so just the trailers and the motor carriers that use the service. Okay. All right, thanks everyone. Really enjoyed it.